Hey friends, welcome back to the Squeaky Wheel Farm. Hi, I'm Christine, and if you've been watching my videos, I recently put out one about the mistakes that I made while I was building this greenhouse. Well, we've made some modifications to the inside as well. So I'd like to show you how I've winterized my greenhouse, and it's looking pretty cool. Come on in. So as you can see, it looks a whole lot different. And I'm going to go through the changes and why I made those changes so that maybe it's something that you want to incorporate into your own greenhouse. Now before I get started, I'd like to give a shout out to Hippie Chick Off-Grid Maine. She gave me a shout out just recently and I got quite a few subscribers from that. And I am trying to grow my channel, so I really appreciate that. And I also would suggest that you check out her channel. It's called Hippie Chick Off-Grid Maine, and I'll put a link in the description. I found her to be very interesting. So give her a look and don't forget to subscribe. And once again, thank you. I wanted to share with you one of the things that I find really important with having a greenhouse. And I don't know quite how to explain this, but wintertime around here gets really dark and dreary and depressing, and it's just awful. And I'm not a person that likes to be out in the cold. So by me having this greenhouse, I'm able to come out to a warm environment and get what sunshine there is coming through the plastic. And it's just so much nicer to have some place to go. Sometimes I can take off my jacket and it'll be warm in here. I can absorb that vitamin D from the sun that we're so lacking in my climate. So if you have a really cold environment and if you have the ability to do some kind of hoop house or greenhouse, even on a small scale, it definitely is worth it. Even if it's not so much for what you're able to grow, but maybe you can overwinter some plants, but more so for my peace of mind, for me being able to get out of the house and get into nature and be able to, just, it makes me feel good. I don't know how else to say that. It makes me feel really good to be able to come out here and just enjoy what little warmth there is and not have to be out in the freezing cold. So if you have the opportunity to get a greenhouse or a hoop house, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. This actually was a homemade one that we had purchased from a farmer that had retired. And I think we paid $200 for the hoops. We had to go take it down, and it was 14 wide by 96 long. So we still have several more hoops. My husband uses them around the farm when he needs to cover some implements for the winter time. He'll put a couple of hoops over them and then just throw a tarp or something for a roof, and that provides extra barn space and storage space that we wouldn't normally have. So this was really a blessing to be able to pick up these hoops. They're not the traditional 2-inch wide. These are like, I don't know, it's like 1 inch or 3/4 inch. It's pipe. It's almost like, I think it's just the heavy duty electrical conduit, but it's really sturdy stuff. You can't bend it to lean against it. So we were really grateful that we were able to find it. And then we just had to piece it together the best we could, to figure out, how to do it. So anyway, I'm so grateful that I have this. And now that I'm looking, if you've been watching, you've seen that we've put the black plastic down on the floor. And I do believe it is helping to keep this a little bit warmer. If nothing else, it helps to draw in the sun. Black absorbs the heat better than any other color. So at the very least, it's a clean surface and it's nice and neat. Excuse me, I've got a bunch of flies in here that just popped up today. And I need to come out here with a fly swatter, but I've got better things to do. So anyway, black plastic, it's called landscape fabric. Always buy the heavy duty stuff and always use the heavy duty staples. They're so worth the money if you can afford it. I've gone the cheap route before on the staples and was so disappointed. They bent just as soon as I tried to put them in the ground. Get what you can afford, but certainly if you can get the better stuff, it is definitely worth it. I brought you in here to show you what I do for the winter time. And the first thing that I want to discuss is growing under cover, which is in cold frames, hoop houses, or sometimes it's just with frost cloth. But depending on your environment and your climate, you might do quite well with one of these systems that'll help extend your growing season. Now I use hoops with a second layer of plastic over them to protect my plants. Now if we have a really cold snap, say it gets down to 0 or below, and that happens often around here in January or February, what I'll often do is I've got a couple of old curtains that I ruined. I'll just lay those over the hoops, and that will give them the protection that they need through the night until the sunlight comes back out again and they can get some heat from the sun or from other sources that I'm going to provide for them. A milk jug full of warm or hot water snuggled up inside your plants with a row cover over it will help get you through those really cold snaps. But if you wanted to, you could paint those black as well and leave them out, and they can help absorb some heat during the daytime if you get enough sunlight hours. Mulch is such an important thing when you're trying to bed down your garden for the winter time, and really it's such a benefit for the plants. It keeps the soil moist, it keeps the roots in the ground warm so that it doesn't freeze. And the more straw or hay or old leaves that you can provide for your plants, the better that they're going to do. I've got potatoes here. They don't normally grow in this kind of weather. I mean, it was 42 degrees last night, but they're growing now. They're green. They're thriving. They're not growing fast, but they are growing. I've got several inches of mulch around them. This is old used straw, but I'm going to add quite a bit more. Probably cover them up to the top of the plants so that they have to peek through again. It's also called the root stout method, where she just grows potatoes in hay or straw. This works pretty well during the winter time. Now, if you aren't aware of what overwintering means, it just means that you're going to grow your vegetables to a harvestable size and then bed them down for the winter. You're just going to bed them down with some hay or some straw or leaves and leave them in the ground. So you don't actually have to harvest them. You're going to harvest them when you're ready to pick them and use them. It saves you a lot of time, effort, and they're just so delicious. There are many plants that grow well during the winter time, and those are going to be your cabbages and your broccolis and spinach and kale. Now those might not be your favorites, but it is nice to have something fresh and green when you're in the middle of winter. And I should also mention that plants, well, most of them want to be above 50 degrees, and they just don't grow as quickly as they do during the summertime because of the lack of heat, but mostly because of the lack of sunlight. In the wintertime, you have much fewer hours of sunlight, and without subsidizing some lighting for these plants, they're just going to grow at a slower rate. Now I'm talking about cool weather varieties. You aren't going to be growing any tomatoes or peppers in the wintertime without a heat source and a source for light. You have to provide extra lighting for them. And while I'm down here, let's talk about thermal mass. I've got some bricks in here and I'm going to add a whole lot more. I was able to pick up a whole pallet of these, I'll call them fish scale bricks, for free. And what that's going to do, that thermal mass, these bricks are going to soak up that heat on those days when you have sunlight, and then they'll give it back off into the greenhouse at night so that it helps maintain a warmer temperature. This is called thermal mass. I've also heard it called of heat sinks, which sometimes can be in the form of water barrels painted black, bricks, rocks, sandbags. There's just so many different ways that you can do a thermal mass or a heat sink. So look into that. I'm definitely adding more and more to this greenhouse as I go because it's so important. So when we're talking about thermal mass and heat sinks, water is a very good conductor of heat. So if you can add more water into your greenhouse in some kind of retention pond or tank or barrel, That is going to go a long way with heating up your greenhouse, or at least keeping it warmer during those cold nights. Now this is showing 70.2 degrees, which is the temperature that it is here in the greenhouse. So it's absorbing the warm temperatures, and water is able to hold on to those temperatures a little bit better than some other things. It's called thermal mass or heat sink, and it's just a really great way to try to extend that heat of the sunlight without actually providing heat or using any type of heaters. Now technically I don't have just a single layer of plastic because I've got these hoops that I've put up, and they were pretty simple. This is just some PVC pipe that I bent and then screwed into the sidewalls into the wood, and then just draped a piece of plastic over the top. This will give me an extra layer of protection for my plants. And on those really cold days, say in January, where it gets down to 0 or 5 below, I can bring out some lightweight blankets or some old curtains and throw them over the top for a day or two until the bad weather passes. I did want to point out this book to you. It's the Winter Harvest Handbook, and it's by Eliot Coleman, who is what I think the guru for winter growing. He just has had such a long career of growing. I really respect any advice that he puts out. So I'll put this book linked into the description just in case you want to check it out. Now, one of the things that I think that I did do right in this greenhouse is before we built it, we buried some pipes, just corrugated pipe underneath this greenhouse. We did go 8 feet down, but I later learned that we didn't even need to go that far. And then we've since added some fans. Now, the fans that I had last year were not quite enough. They didn't provide enough flow for the air exchange. So these are much better. They do provide much better airflow. And so I'm able to pull that heat up out of the ground. Now the ground around here is 52 degrees year round. So even on the coldest days when it's 32 degrees outside or less, maybe even 0, I'm able to pull 50-degree heat out of the ground. And with the addition of these row covers, I can keep that heat under this row cover and help provide some warmth for my plants. So if you know or have somebody that might know, please comment in the description so that I can use that information. But my idea is if I put compost tea in barrels instead of just water, I wonder if the bacteria in there and the microbes would help to keep it warm, because they do that in a compost pile, and I'm wondering if they would do that in a barrel as well. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. Oh, and one more thing. I hope to see you again soon. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, watch this next.